Thank you, Professor Geno. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's panel on the role of AI in conflict. We'll be exploring how AI can help achieve security, focusing on potential to find pathways to peace, build trust amongst international actors, and enhance resilience within the global system. We'll also be discussing the use by national militaries in warfare. Our goal is to keep the conversation factual and neutral, recognizing it's a sensitive topic. It is important to start by understanding what we mean by AI, especially in the context of international conflict. Luckily, we have Ansaf Salleb-Aouissi with us, an AI expert from Columbia Engineering. She will guide us in that process. It is also important for us to define conflict, which in this context encompasses a range of interactions, from local disputes to full-scale war between nations. As we discuss these matters, we must remain vigilant about the risks. In fact, one of the most significant concerns is the development and deployment of autonomous lethal weapons. Ulrike Franke joins us, whose work on drones and the future of warfare will help us navigate these developments. However, as AI advances up the cognitive ladder, it is not just about AI driving drones or fighter planes. We are approaching an era where AI could play a significant role in strategic decision-making, encroaching on the role of policymakers, whether in the military, foreign policy, or peacekeeping. This shift raises questions about the future of conflict and peace, the role of human judgment, and has numerous potential unintended consequences. It poses questions about ethics, control, and accountability, particularly if, as Julia Angwin has written in the New York Times, AI is beginning to look more like an unreliable intern than as a superintelligent autonomous entity. Our discussion will navigate these themes, aiming to provide a comprehensive and critical view of AI's role in international conflict. We will be seeking a nuanced understanding that can guide responsible deployment. Thank you for joining us today. This is a huge topic, which is changing like a sandstorm in front of our very eyes, but we promise to stay on point. Let's begin by introducing our distinguished panelists. Dr. Ansaf Salleb-Aouissi is a renowned AI expert and researcher here at Columbia University, specializing in machine learning, data mining, and educational technologies. She recently founded AI-Fabet, a nonprofit organization to disseminate free and quality AI education amongst teens. Ansaf is the recipient of an NIH award for decoding maternal morbidity and was elected as a future AI educator by the 8th Symposium on Educational Advances in AI. Julia Angwin is a prominent investigative journalist, a New York Times contributing opinion writer, a founder of the nonprofit journalism studio Proof News. Julia is known for her extensive work on technology's impact on society, with a focus on privacy, surveillance, and algorithmic accountability. Her reporting sheds new light on the hidden aspects of the digital age. For this work, she has won the Pulitzer Prize for explanatory reporting. Dr. Ulrike Franke, joining us via Zoom, is a senior policy fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. Her expertise bridges the gap between emerging military technologies and strategic policy, influencing contemporary security discussions. Her research focuses on German and European defense, the future of warfare, and drone technology. So let's start with a question to Ansaf. Ansaf, what is AI? What can it do? What can it not do? Perhaps starting with the established technologies, machine learning, natural language processing, and computer vision.
Sure. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me. I'll probably start with the simple definition of AI that came from John McCarthy. He's one of the founders of AI. He's the one who coined the term AI in the 50s. He said it's the science and engineering of what we call intelligent machines or intelligent agents. So everything is an agent in AI. But an agent is not like your thermostat. It's an agent that has two specificities, right? One is that it has access to large computational power, right? Think about self-driving car. And second, it has to have to deal with an environment in which decision-making is not trivial, right? So it's not like reducing your temperature, it's more than that. So a self-driving car needs to make a lot of decisions in a changing environment that is stochastic in nature. So these are the two characteristics of intelligent agents. So these intelligent agents are already in many of our devices. So think about the GPS, for instance. These are called search agents. They search how to get you from point A to point B, right? Pathfinder, it's called Pathfinders. It's also in game solvers like chess or Go or Sudoku. It's also in computer vision, which is one of the AI fields that has flourished in the last couple of decades. Face recognition, for instance, recognizing digital envelope or an ATM machine, right? Reading checks. So computer vision has seen tremendous progress in the last couple of decades and is being applied in industry a lot today. Natural language processing, which is the topic of large language models, is also a flourishing field that has seen a lot of ups and downs in the history of AI. But it is basically an agent that learns from text, patterns that can lead to, for instance, machine translation among different languages, text summarization, and so on and so forth. There's also robotics, and there are also other fields of AI that actually has flourished in the, in the last decades. Machine learning, machine learning specifically, is one of the drivers. These are the algorithms that power a lot of AI today, right? These are intelligent algorithms. Many of them use what we call connectionism, in other words, artificial neural networks, right? That learn patterns from data. And this is powering AI today. Did I answer the question? Yes.
Thank you. My next question is going to be about the future trends. What is the hype around large language models, generative AI, and what is happening there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So large language models are, under the hood, they are neural network, right? They learn from very large amounts of data from text, how to understand language. I put understand between quotes. It's really pattern matching, right? So how to understand language and how to generate language in a text. Keep in mind that being able to converse with a machine has been a dream for the AI community, for humans. Since the early movies, so remember the sci-fi movies, talking to a machine has been a dream. It took decades to get there to what LLMs are today. Remember, for instance, Jeopardy 2011, right, where the IBM Watson was able to win against two human players. So it took time to get there, right? But today, what LLMs are able to do is unprecedented, right? So it's a huge leap in AI research. So you could think about it as a hype because we use terms like hallucinations that are human characteristics. Many agree that we should not use these terms because at the end of the day, an LLM doesn't have the ability to reason, to think. It's just at the end of the day, pattern matching between what you put in the prompt and what it matches with the data that it learned from. Right. So the next maybe we have seen LLMs deployed a lot today. It's a game changer for many applications. It's not perfect, but you could think that systems like, I forgot, Turtles or something like that, that can supplement the doctor by, for instance, eliminating the need to take notes, right? So it cuts the time of documenting, the burden of documenting. It's seen in interesting applications like I saw one recently, Parent GPT for new parents. They ask, they send a lot of questions into Google to ask about breastfeeding, about colic, so this is an application that is learning from curated data from peer-reviewed publications, along with for example, the NICHD and things like that. And so we're going to see more and more of these applications flourishing, especially in education. Khan Academy launched Camigo, which is basically a tutoring system that can give flashcards to students, help them learn the subject, and they are doing pretty well. So we're going to see more and more of those, with especially the trend going forward is to make them less hallucinate, right? By making them specialized. So they will be learning from augmented data. This is called RAG, I think retrieval augmented generation. This is actually the trend today to not to train them from scratch, but add additional curated text that can make them more specific and more reliable. Right, so this is a trend I see nowadays.
Thank you. That's interesting. Is it correct to say that the main difference is that AI can now talk?
Yeah, AI can talk. It's not a human. It's not a.
But we can converse.
We can converse. Yeah, that's the leap today. It's amazing. Yeah.
All right, over to Ulrike. Ulrike, can you talk about the ways AI has been used in current conflicts? What developments are imaginable and or likely, and what problems would they bring?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me, and I'm sorry to be kind of hovering over you like this. So this is a kind of easy and short question with a longer and not so easy answer, simply because very much like in the civilian world, AI, because it is, you know, such a big thing to begin with, and a kind of omni-use technology, can be used in a full range of different ways. So contrary to past military technological innovation, where you get kind of one new capability, say drones or the tank or something like that, that you put on the battlefield and then learn how to use it, AI is an enabling capability and can in fact be helped, can be used to help improve all kinds of capabilities on the battlefield and beyond kind of, or behind the front lines. I think among the most important ways that AI is already being used in the military realm is, well, data analysis. So AI kind of helping to go through all this data that is collecting on the battlefield or beforehand, and help us to take decisions on the basis of this, right? So if you have drones that collect tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of hours of drone feeds of videos, you don't want human beings having to go through this to find patterns, to spot anything out of the ordinary. AI, I mean, computers first of all, but AI in particular is very good at this. And we see at the moment, you've probably seen reports coming out of Gaza that the Israeli military is reportedly, I can't confirm this, but reportedly using AI-enabled capabilities to go through the data that they have collected on Gaza and people in Gaza, to then find target recommendations, right? So this is one use how AI has already been used in the military realm. Another big area is autonomy, because we now have lots of uncrewed systems already, and we now have to use them in a very contested environment, meaning that the signals are being jammed. And if you fly, say, a drone, remotely piloted drone, and signals between the drone and yourself are being jammed, that's very unfortunate, because it means, you know, your drone may crash, or at least you don't get the information anymore that the drone is collecting. Now, one way out of this problem is to give the drone more autonomy, and one way to give any system more autonomy is to make it more intelligent, i.e. give it artificial intelligence so that it kind of knows what to do and where to go. So autonomy is a big field as well. And it's not just about uncrewed system. I use the example because that's the kind of most obvious, but you also have it in other kind of, for example, defensive systems and other ways where autonomy can play a big role. Further behind the front lines, logistics, right? This is also a big theme in the civilian world, but military logistics can also benefit massively and is already benefiting massively from AI that tells you which part to replace when and what to have in stock, things like that. So here AI can simply help to make processes more efficient, ideally cheaper, and just more effective. And then there's a whole field in the military realm, which is cyber, so kind of out of the physical world, if you like. And here there's a big debate on whether AI helps primarily the defense or the offense, but in any case, AI does help to patch up holes, but also to find holes in cyber defenses. And so that's another use case. I could go on and on, which I'm not going to do, but the main point here really is that AI is an enabling capability, right? It's not one thing that you put on the battlefield, but rather pretty much any system and any capability can be augmented, if you like, with artificial intelligence, and therefore, so the promise be made faster and more precise, more accurate, ideally cheaper. But of course, there's a number of pitfalls as well that we can discuss.
Thank you, Ulrike. Over to Julia. You recently wrote in the New York Times about how AI is overhyped. Why?
Well, thanks for having me. I'm your resident AI skeptic. I'm a longtime technology journalist. I grew up in Silicon Valley, started coding when I was in elementary school, and I fell in love with journalism and then sort of soon realized I was the only journalist in the room who kind of used computers, knew how to do it. So have been covering the Silicon Valley industry for multiple decades. And I think that the thing about AI being hyped is that we are being promised by these AI tech billionaires, they're all billionaires, it seems, that we're reaching something called artificial general intelligence, that we're on this like steady march towards general intelligence where you could kind of ask this AI something and it's going to be super intelligent, right? Like it can give you a recipe and it can target your drone strike, right? And like the reality of intelligence actually is that oftentimes with humans, I don't want the person deciding on the drone strike to also be my recipe person. And I think that's also true for machines, right? So in general, machines are best when they're specialized. And so I think what we're being promised is this thing about general intelligence, but what we're seeing on the ground, like when you look at what is happening with AI right now, like how does it work right now? If I were to ask it a question about breastfeeding or anything else, like it's not, it's not necessarily going to give you an accurate answer because it's making a statistical inference about what words should be next to each other in a sentence. It's not trying to reference, the literature. And even when you give it the literature in the RAG, as you described, it's still making the inference based on the probabilities of words near each other. And so I think the real question about AI is, in what circumstances are you willing to live with that risk, right, of it being wrong? And like in low stakes environments, sure, if you wanted to like do a first draft of your of an email that's annoying to write, like sure, you're going to edit it anyways. But like when you get to high stakes environments and you have a probabilistic system that is not based on accuracy, that based on pattern matching, then the question I have is, do we want to do that, right? Because it's actually a very expensive technology for our resources, right? Energy usage is skyrocketing. And also to be, you've all seen the stories about Scarlett Johansson's voice that was taken by OpenAI. I mean, a lot of this data that was taken non-consensually to train these AIs. So it's actually expensive in terms of our society, right? Because what I worry about, and I've written about in the Times as well, is this idea that if everything that is put into the public sphere by people who are good-hearted people who want to just contribute to Wikipedia or want to offer tips on coding on Stack Overflow, and all of that is swept into these for-profit systems, I think it disincentivizes participation in our public sphere. So I think that AI is very costly in those ways. And then I also think that the benefits haven't been proven. Like they might be there, but like every round that we're talking about, drone strikes or not, like they're massive flaws and failures where we've hit the wrong targets and we've gotten the wrong answers. I started this Newsroom Improved News earlier this year. I brought election officials from across the US to Columbia, actually into this room. And we did testing of AI systems to see were they providing accurate responses to voter queries, like literally just the basics. Where can I vote? Can I vote by text? And we got these questions from the election officials themselves. Like these are the kinds of questions that they get. Their offices are deluged with these questions. And more than 51% of the answers were inaccurate. And so they just don't have a great track record for accuracy. So I guess the thing I'm saying is, where do you want a system that's really expensive and inaccurate? Like there might be places, but not all the places.
Yeah, very, very true. Thank you. We'll come back to the issue of energy resources later. Back to Ansaf. As an AI expert, what positive applications do you see for AI in conflict zones? And can you give us some examples?
So I'll try. So basically, I think not being an expert in conflicts or anything like that, I think AI has the potential to, one, maybe monitor conflicts. This could be through different modalities of data. Could be precise satellite images. It could be voices. It could be different things. So that's monitoring conflict could be one. The second thing is, and I'm really excited about education. So kids in conflict zones don't have access to education. And we have seen that AI in education is doing great in terms of tutoring. I mentioned Camingo, but this could be maybe kids can continue to go to school thanks to AI, which is great. That's also could be from the robotics perspective. There could be robots who can help rescue people. work together. So these are called multi-agent systems powered by reinforcement learning. So they, we see people, dig in with their hands. It could be like this could be a task for robotics if they're available. There could be also robots helping or AI systems helping surgeons and at a distance, right? So to make so that in conflict zone, there sometimes there's a need to do hundreds of orthopedic surgeries, but robotic surgery is a reality today, so it works, and good advances on that. So could think about how AI can complement the surgeons, the nurses, when they have to deal with a lot of victims, right, or a lot of injuries. So I think from these perspectives, I do feel that AI has the potential, this is pointing to Julia, to augment humans because AI is fast. I know that the cost is still prohibitive, right? But the cost will go down, and there is a value into keeping AI actually as our augmentation, as our helper, rather than replacing us. Human has always to be in the loop to check the answer, but if it can cut down time, for instance, for a surgeon who can't read hundreds of publications per week, right, or can't read hundreds of charts, right, or millions of charts, AI can do that. So in the conflict specifically, it can help guide surgeons in their decisions. It can help do surgeries, remotely. That's my take on that.
Well, that's fascinating, and we often don't think about that, but the continuation of the provision of services like healthcare, education. Thank you for that. Ulrike, it is often not the state leading innovation in the field, but rather the private sector. What does that mean for the balance of power between the state and the private sector, in your opinion?
Yeah, that is such an important question. If you allow me 2 sentences, I think it's really important on your question of how can AI kind of have a positive impact on conflicts. I think it is important to just note that even when we're talking real military equipment, making weapons better is, generally speaking, a good thing. Now, we should be very wary of anyone who promises that AI will somehow make wars better, that somehow we're going to get bloodless war and somehow, people won't die anymore, there will be no suffering, anything like that. That has never been true. I absolutely don't believe this. But if AI helps to make weapons more precise, that is generally a good thing. Now, of course, these weapons can still be used in the most horrific ways, and then there's no advantage. But generally speaking, if a weapon only kills the person it is supposed to kill and not, bystanders, that is a good thing. So just to kind of, and then also the fact that AI does help, for example, to keep soldiers out of harm's way because it can enable more, remotely piloted or even autonomous systems. That's also a good thing. Now, again, we shouldn't go too far and kind of say, well, therefore wars will somehow be less horrific. It has never been true, but in specific instances, it can really have a positive impact in warfare, not just when it is used for things that were rightly pointed out, like surgery and medical support and all of this. But on your question of the role of the private sector, this is absolutely crucial. So I've been, as many people in my field have, of course, been watching the war in Ukraine and against Ukraine very closely. And I've studied how new technologies, not even just AI, but other systems as well, are being used in this war and the role that they're playing in this war. And the really striking thing that I found was that most of the kind of cutting edge or just kind of vitally important technological capabilities that Ukraine and to some extent Russia uses and need aren't provided by states. So the US and other countries obviously give a lot of military aid and military equipment to Ukraine, but rather by private companies. The kind of big US tech firms being chief among them. That, of course, now we're only talking about Ukraine. They're not helping Russia, but, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, like these are not just private firms, but private firms that actually are just operating in the civilian market, or very primarily operating in the civilian market. And they have provided vitally important capabilities, it's more services than goods, to Ukraine. For example, access to the cloud computing, and the ability to store vitally important data for Ukraine in the cloud that then can't be, destroyed anymore if you destroy servers in Ukraine. Google has helped put Ukrainian websites under a cyber umbrella. So these are and the biggest example I think that we're all very well aware of is Starlink and SpaceX. So the satellite-based internet connectivity that has allowed the Ukrainian armed forces to fight as they do and have kept, the Ukrainian civilians linked to the rest of the world. That is provided by now I have to say primarily civilian company, SpaceX. And I feel that this is a development that we really need to watch insofar as this is pretty new. Now, we had decades, basically since the Sputnik shock of the 1950s, where groundbreaking technological developments came primarily out of the state-sponsored or indeed military-sponsored realm, and military-sponsored research institutes, laboratories, etc. I mean, GPS, the internet, Teflon, that came out a lot of this came out of DARPA, but mainly kind of state and military-sponsored laboratories and research institutes. And that is no longer the case. I mean, DARPA is still doing interesting and important stuff, don't get me wrong, but it is quite striking that, the AI that we just talked about comes from OpenAI, which is a private company with no primary links to the military realm. And so I think there are two sides to this coin. On the one hand, the state or states need to realize that there are now capabilities that they may need in military confrontations, that they are no longer producing themselves, but they need to rely on private companies, which can be okay, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we need to do everything ourselves by the state, but then you need to have kind of relationship with these companies and work with these companies and establish contract with these companies, which, by the way, is exactly what happened with Starlink and SpaceX. States should think about whether they are okay with these vulnerabilities. There may be areas where they say, well, actually, we should be doing this ourselves. There is a particular challenge for, I'd say, non-US states, because it's one thing to say I rely on companies that are kind of from my country, even though we should all be aware that we're talking big companies that are very global and not just, say, American. But still, there's a difference whether you're Germany relying on Microsoft or whether you are the US relying on Microsoft. And I guess this is even more true when you are a non-Western, non-US state. So there's this challenge for the state and for our societies. How much do we want to rely on these companies? What is it that we should be doing ourselves? What are the big things we should be looking at anyway? And then also for private companies, there's a challenge here, because you as a private civilian companies, you may not actually want to be involved in military confrontations and in kind of military, your services being used for military means. And I'm sure you're all aware that there have been instances where Google employees, for example, have protested against Google cooperating with the Pentagon. But even if this is the case, and you don't want to work for in any kind of military context, are you even able to control how your systems are being used? Because look at the drones that are being used in Ukraine. These drones, a huge part of those drones are civilian drones, and they are made by the Chinese manufacturer DJI. That is a civilian drone maker. You and I can buy DJI drones in a store or off the internet. Now, DJI actually stopped operating in Ukraine and Russia a few weeks into the war, and yet hundreds of thousands of their drones are being used in this war. Now, I don't have any insight to the extent that they really try to stop this, but what I'm saying is that even if you don't want to kind of provide capabilities in a military conflict, as a company that produces anything that may have use cases in a military confrontation, we need to think about this more. So I think we're entering a kind of new world here in this relationship between the state and company that we didn't have for quite a long time. And I'm actually trying to kind of look into past times, East India Company and things like that, because of course, there were moments where private companies were much more involved in war and in war and military confrontation than in the last few decades. But I think we're observing a change here that is driven yeah, a lot by the technological developments and specifically AI developments in the private sector. And that is, well, quite exciting from a political science point of view, but these kind of changes also and never come without tensions, let's say.
Thank you, Ulrike. Very interesting. On your first point, I'm tempted to say that we might be better off with sticks and stones than with smart weapons. On your second point, do you believe that when East India Company, which was a private enterprise, and I'm glad you brought that up, was leading development, then there was a switch to then a more imperial type system and a colonial system. Do you see any reflections of that in our current history?
Well, in a way, I mean, that's almost historical research. I wanna say that we should be doing. So what I'm saying is that it does feel like we're observing a new development that really does question certain procedures and kind of ways that we haven't put in place, because as I was saying, for the last decades, half a century, however long you wanna make this, the state, and again, state-funded, military-funded entities were much more in the center of technological development. So for us, this is new. But then again, this in past times, we may have already seen this. So this is why I kind of feel that possibly there are things to learn from the past. I don't have these insights yet, I must admit, and I kind of, tell historians to look into this, but because I don't think that I will necessarily do this. But I think this is worth looking into. And as I was saying, I think it's important to also remember that this is also a topic for the companies, right? This isn't just for states to think about, because also, think about being a company that does provide some kind of, again, militarily relevant services that may not be kind of properly speaking military to begin with, but somehow they're relevant in a military conflict. Now, in this war of aggression of Russia against Ukraine, no Western company had to think about twice who to support in this war if they were deciding to support a side, right? I mean, they couldn't work with Russia anyway because of sanctions, but they did not want to in any case. But let's be honest, there will in all likelihoods be wars and military confrontations in the future where companies may have business interests on both sides, where the legal situation is not quite as black and white as it is with Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. And so I also kind of tell companies to put procedures in place on how to even deal with such a situation and decide, well, who to work with, who not to work with, whether or not to work with anyone at all, how to decide this, how to keep out of this if necessary, all of these things. So again, definitely a development that's kind of more societal, that we need to think about it, driven by new tech.
Great. We're going to switch tack a little bit here and go to you, Julia. Can you talk about the role of AI in the psychological domain of conflict? For example, in online information environments like social media during elections.
Absolutely. I do want to slightly redeem my reputation, though, as the AI hater, because I just want to say there's some things AI is really good at. And you know what AI is really good at? Surveillance. No, it's true, right? And so, 10 years ago, facial recognition technology was, the error rates were 30%. AI has made, in the past 10 years, those error rates go down to 0.3%. Okay, so that is an incredible leap because AI, as you pointed out, is very good at pattern matching. And so when you're trying to match photos and do facial recognition, it has superpowered that, right? And I would also say that surveillance historically can be effective at preventing conflict, right? The mutual surveillance of nuclear stockpiles between Russia and the US averted nuclear war and the destruction of our planet, right? So there's a very good track record for surveillance being something that can prevent conflict. And so I do want to point out that, like, having this probabilistic assessment from the air, right? That now we can do with drones or whatever, but is something that can sometimes help change the trajectory away from conflict. It can also accelerate conflict. So it doesn't always work that way. And I would also say that it is not entirely clear to me that better facial recognition is a public good. Okay, I am not sure about that. And so I just want to put in a bid to say I'm not a Luddite. I don't, not recognize the benefits, but I do think you just have to be really clear about where the domains are that AI excels at. There are places where it doesn't excel. Medical diagnoses, it does not excel at. There are multiple studies, and so far it has not been doing well on those. So now going to your question on information environments. So, as a journalist, I work in trying to put trustworthy, rigorous information into the information environment. As you may all know, as readers of information, it's getting real polluted out there. So it's not just AI, right? There's also just the financial incentives that come with basically, clickbait farms, fake news. And then when you add state actors who really want to, this is very important in the Ukraine-Russia conflict, right? Both sides have actually very sophisticated information operations trying to make the story look a certain way, create outrage in their populations to support the war. And, AI makes it easier to do those operations. It makes it, there was, remember, I don't know if you all remember, but in 2016, there was the famous story about the Macedonian teenagers who'd been hired to create like fake news on Facebook. Like, you don't need the Macedonian teenagers anymore, right? Like, you just go to ChatGPT and say, make me a story or make me a video or make me and now we have the voice clones. So I think what is happening in the information landscape is something extremely worrying, because I think if it gets to the point where you can't trust anything, that actually is something that authoritarian leaders love. They love to destroy the information environment and then say, I'm the only trustworthy one, right? And so it doesn't enable democracy. It doesn't enable citizen participation. It doesn't empower people. And so I'm very worried about the overall trend of our information environments becoming so untrustworthy that people retreat and don't participate.
Thank you. And thank you for your clarification there. I'm sure a lot of us in the room feel like you do, kind of on the fence about these issues. I have a follow-up question. Do you see the possibility of fighting AI-powered disinformation with AI-powered surveillance of speech?
That's a great question. As you probably all know, there are all the different social media platforms invest in this sort of farms of workers, usually in the third world, getting paid very little to try to like take hate speech and problematic speech off of their platforms. Those jobs are terrible. The people who work in them have PTSD from looking at terrible images all day long. And there is a real promise that AI might help automate those jobs. And there's a guy who was actually at my AI testing session in January. He's the former head of trust and safety at OpenAI. He's now at Stanford working very hard to build basically these AI content moderation systems. And I think that is actually a great use of AI, because that is a job that we don't want humans to have to do, because it is a horrible job. And if we could take it to the point where really the AI does most of the work and then humans just only have to look at the images that are on the edge, that would be an advantage. But the thing that you're talking about is, it does mean that we're just having a battle of AIs, right? So it will become an arms race, right? Just like every other technological battle, right? The AI will get smarter, and then the content moderation AI will get smarter, and they will continue to fight each other out. And I think we all, as readers of information and viewers of information online, we still suffer, because ultimately what we will be looking at will still be kind of like an information battleground as opposed to a place of reliable information. And so I think what's happening, unfortunately, as you probably all know, is that the good quality information is going behind paywalls, right? And that is actually a really unfortunate thing, because what that means is really that only rich people can see the high quality information and everyone else is sort of off fighting their way through this sort of like polluted landscape. And I really hate to see that as the evolution. And I would like to preserve a public domain that does have high quality information.
Yes, in fact, I did have to update my subscription to read your article. I do believe you make a strong point about how authoritarian rulers thrive in information chaos, and we have to be wary of that. All right, Ansaf, we're going to try to make you into the AI skeptic now. What do you think will be the impact of AI on the distribution of power? Is it an equalizer, or will it increase inequality between states and between peoples?
Okay, that's a great question. And let me start first by also redeeming myself that I don't want to. I don't want you to leave with the impression that AI is perfect and it is actually a game changer, a great technology. It does come with risks, right? So the risk of autonomous weapons exists. So I don't know, a few years ago, there was a speculative video about slaughter bots and the danger of autonomous weapons that was circulating. That was pretty well done. But also from the fact that AI is, belongs today to, as you mentioned, to some companies, right, who can have their interest in there. It could be from fake news. It could be from, the danger can come just like any technology that we have seen throughout, decades, comes with danger. And with time, I think we need to regulate, its use, to regulate who possesses it, and to regulate basically how to make it accessible to everybody, right? So going back to your question, Eduardo, so basically, I think, of course, AI is not an equalizer at this time, right? Those with the data, those with the algorithms, those with the computational power have the advantage. And at this point, I think the divide between North-South will only deepen further if we don't allow AI to be democratized, right? One way to do it is through education, right? So give AI education to everyone, right? For free. Right? This can help people understand, not only solve problems in their own communities, but also help prevent conflict, help deal with conflict, and help deal with the problems they have. The other thing is AI regulations. So it's maybe hard to do AI regulations, but those companies who possesses the AI technology has to go open source. I believe in open source systems can just lead to more transparency and also make AI accessible, right, to the large, to everyone. So I think these are my takes on that. And I would just like to mention, to finish, a quote from Andrew Ng. He's the co-founder of Coursera and also a Stanford professor, who puts it this way. He said, just like the Industrial Revolution has freed up humanity from physical drudgery, AI has the potential to free up humanity from mental drudgery. We get there. Maybe it's not perfect nowadays, but if we cite, for example, healthcare, we don't have very good diagnostic systems. And the reason is that AI came to healthcare only now. We don't have any interdisciplinary team. For a long time, we didn't have an interdisciplinary team working on advancing healthcare and understanding science. It worked very well for finance because the money was there, but now it is coming to healthcare and education. These are the next applications where we're going to see more and more impact of AI to do better healthcare. And again, the reason is that AI can read a lot of documents. AI can access millions of patients' health records, which a doctor can't, right? So that's complementing AI complementing the healthcare system as well. So I do think that, the balance is not there, but ultimately with work from different stakeholders, including governments and maybe, everyone, we can get there, hopefully. Right, thank you.
Well, I do hope that being relieved from mental drudgery doesn't make us mentally lazy. We will have an opportunity to open the floor to questions, but I have one more bonus question on the topic of energy. You brought that up earlier, Julie. I thought that was an interesting point. What are the possible chokeholds to AI innovation? Is it possible, as some have begun to speak about, a kind of a fossil fuel limitation, so that we must move to nuclear in order to fuel a future in which AI is promiscuous everywhere?
Well, Sam Altman has said that he thinks that he can't move forward with AI unless he gets nuclear fission, and certainly that a lot of the tech companies have said that energy access is a limitation to the ability to grow their AI models, and there is a belief in Silicon Valley that they need bigger and bigger models to get, meaning, and when I say bigger, I mean more and more data they need to crunch in order to get better output. I think that's an open question, to be honest. I think there's an argument to be made that the thing you're talking about, which is specialized models with more discrete training data, might actually be more useful. I think we don't know, but I think that regardless, the tech companies have said they need more and more data, and they need more and more data centers. Microsoft just broke ground on some gigantic new data center. The Virginia data center that is area that is like filled with all the data centers for all the companies has said they've basically run out of power and they can't scale up anymore. Like all of Virginia's power is going there. So there's a real question about whether, and of course these data centers, they try to make them green energy efficient, but of course that's never going to be 100%, right? Because when the sun's not shining or the wind's not blowing or whatever, you're going to have to rely on fossil fuels. So I think I think that in an energy constrained world, it's worth asking the question whether it's worth it, because these if you look at the rates of energy usage of all the big tech companies, it's literally like just a hockey stick going straight up to the top. And I'm not sure. Like, I think it's cool that like it can write sentences for me for my emails, but like, is that worth it? I'm not sure.
Good point. All right, we have about 20 minutes left for some questions from the audience. Yes?
Okay, I don't want to stand up in front. Thank you very much. This was a very, very interesting panel, and you touched on so many different issues that I have tons and tons of questions coming up, but I limit myself to two. So one of the aspects that has only been touched upon a little bit was it depends so much on what we're putting in, and what we're putting in is biased data. We know that already, that a lot of data of the real world is just missing. It's not there. It hasn't been put into the AI systems. When you talk to statistic experts, they speak about the difficulty of data collection, especially when we look, for example, into the developing world. When we look at medicine, it's about, well, women's health. It's coming up more and more that we're missing a lot of data and information there. So I wanted to get your take on that a little bit, because it hasn't come up that all the AI that's out there is bringing in a lot of bias from the real world. And the second question on the autonomous weapon system, we have heard a lot yesterday already about this. We've talked a little bit about it, that AI systems are 85% accurate in terms of finding out who is a combatant and who isn't, whereas humans are only 70% accurate. So that was a number that came up, and I found it very interesting, because the question still is, do we want AI to make that decision if we're putting in, if they're just pattern matching? We go on things that have happened in the past, but a war situation is a very messy situation, and things might not always go according to patterns, especially in evolving new technology battlefields. Things might change very quickly. So even if the AI is intelligent enough to match a pattern from the past, it should not be possible for it to make a decision. So this whole question of where is the human in the loop, even if we make errors, what if an AI system makes an error? Who is accountable? That whole question is still out there, and it's a big discussion that's happening at the moment, but it hasn't really been touched upon. And Ulrike has made quite a few points on that, and I'd be interested to hear your opinion on that as well. Thanks.
It looks like everybody wants to answer. So, oh, maybe we'll start with Ulrike, then we'll go to Julia and Ansaf. Ulrike, since it's a military-based question, maybe you can start.
Yeah, thank you. So just on the problem of biased data, that's definitely something that's also being discussed in the military realm, because of course we only have data from the military confrontations that we have fought, if even that, and of course that creates a number of biases. So that's something that everybody is very aware of. And then there's lots of data we just don't have. There is no data on a nuclear war, which is, good news for us, but because it means that there's been no nuclear war has been fought, but of course it means that we just don't have that data. But on your question on autonomous weapon systems, so I mean, obviously, and I'm sure you know this, these numbers that you quoted are extremely difficult to kind of prove, and it depends on the context and how good are AI-enabled systems really, and how good are human beings really. But what's interesting about your question is that you already opened the question of what if the AI-enabled system is better than a human being but not perfect? Because that's in a way the most likely situation, right? If an AI-enabled system was perfect, 100%, it may be easier to decide, when to use it, and if you're willing to use it. But if it's, as you say, 85% or even 90%, that's good, but it still makes mistakes, but it is much better than a human being, then you kind of really run into a problem. And so in the end, I feel that it is really a societal question, whether or not as societies we are okay with delegating certain decisions and to put it very bluntly, decisions over life and death of a human being to a machine, if that machine is better at this than humans. Because very rationally speaking, you should say, okay, so human beings are 75% accurate in distinguishing competence and non-competence. That's just kind of adapt this for the sake of the argument. And the AI is 85%. Well, then you go with the better number, right? You get less mistakes. So that's good. Are we okay with this if it still means that machines may be killing an innocent bystander? And even if it's 100%, even if it's 100% accurate, then you still have the decision of, are we okay as societies to have machines decide on whether a human being lives or dies? And there are activists out there that say, no, this is genuinely and always a mistake. A human being needs to take the responsibility for this decision. And therefore, we shouldn't be doing this. But we should also be honest and say, like, this is a kind of ethical and moral judgment that not everybody may share. And this is the big discussion we're currently having in this field on lethal autonomous weapon systems, that there's this agreement on how willing we are to take the human out of the loop, or rather take away meaningful human control, as we now say, if it means that we may get better results on paper, but that no one is responsible anymore. So this is a huge question in the field that we don't. There's no straight answer to this. What I have certainly felt over the last years, and that's my final thought on this, I feel that especially before the war against Ukraine and in Gaza happened, there were much more people saying, there need to be ethical and moral boundaries, and there's just things we shouldn't be doing, and this would be kind of bad for our societies. And I have to admit that in my discussions over the last 2+ years, I have seen more and more people say, what, these ethical and legal considerations, our enemies don't care about those, which I find an interesting assumption, by the way, but that's the saying, like, our enemies don't care about those. So we are just kind of we are fighting, or we will be fighting with one hand bound behind our backs, and we shouldn't be doing that. And I must admit that does worry me a bit, because even though, I'm not an activist, and I do believe that there is a place for AI-enabled capabilities, including AI-enabled autonomy in warfare, I do feel that this idea of saying, all these ethical considerations somehow, we shouldn't think too much about those. I don't think that is a direction of thinking that I'm super comfortable with.
And that might be a place where something like a UN comes in handy.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, the United Nations so the United Nations, or at the United Nations, we've talked about lethal autonomous weapon systems since 2013 or 14 in Geneva, right, at the CCW, the conventional, certain conventional weapons under the UN. And these debates, like on the one hand, you could say, oh my God, they've been talking about this for 10 years and nothing has come out of it, which is kind of true. We don't have a ban, we don't have regulation, we don't have any kind of treaty. So you could say this has totally failed. On the other hand, my experience has been that these last 10 years of these discussions in Geneva have really helped drive the debate on this forward. And a lot of countries, especially in the early years, a lot of countries hadn't thought about this at all. It wasn't really on their mind yet. And the UN kind of forced them to work out what they were even thinking about this, because if you send someone to Geneva, they need to know what to say. And so this has definitely helped move the debate forward. They have expert panels and all of this, so this allowed people to work on this. And so I very much support these Geneva discussions, and I think they have helped. But let's be honest, there is no international treaty on the horizon that somehow limits the use of autonomy in warfare. Yeah, on that level, you could say it has failed so far.
Thank you, Ulrike. We want to open the floor to more questions, but I know that Julia and Ansaf had something to say about this question.
Sorry, we're really just eager to jump in, but I just thank you so much for bringing up my favorite topic, which is liability, because, when you asked what is AI, what is the definition of AI, I wrote in my notes, AI is just a liability shield. Think about it. AI is automated judgments. Literally, that's what it is. It's making a decision. You're allowing the software to make a decision that humans normally made. Why would you do that? Because you want to not take accountability for that decision. And that is, I'm sorry to say, a huge motivation for the use of AI, right? Everyone has experienced this, right? Even if you go to the airline counter and something is wrong with your ticket, they type away, they're like, the machine won't let me do it, right? This is, of course, this is what everybody wants in their life, is somebody to blame. And so the thing is that AI is the perfect thing for that, right? Oh, I don't know why my AI is telling you all these biased things. It must be because all these people on the internet are biased, and this is what the tech companies say, right? It's not our fault that everything that we scraped off of Reddit is totally misogynistic. It's just that's how Reddit is, and we put that into our system. And so I think you have to really think about liability when you think about AI, because otherwise and I think human in the loop is not the solution. Human in the loop actually adds more liability to the human, because all of a sudden they are looking at an AI recommendation, and if they don't do it, they're in trouble with their boss, right? And so actually it's worse, because then they're basically managing a system that is sort of babysitting a system that's making rogue decisions, and they're afraid to differ from it. And that has definitely been proven to be true by studies that was showing how people work with autonomous systems. So I think that I just want to applaud you and say that everyone here who thinks about AI in their life should always think about liability first.
I'll try to be brief, but thank you for this excellent question that brings in ethical AI. So there are two aspects to ethical AI, and this is actually a flourishing research in AI, really. For the last 5 years, people have been working a lot on fairness and interpretability of AI models. Of course, bias in, bias out in the model. They can reflect social disparity, they can reflect prejudices, etc., historical data. So there's also positive errors in the data. And the research committee is trying to address that by first either debiasing the data at different levels, so either at the data level, at the model level, where when they build an objective function that learns a prediction model, they will have a term specific to avoid bias for any segment of society, or at the post-processing, which is checking the model fairness against different segments in society. And we have seen disparities in models toward African American or toward other segments of the population. So this is an active research area I wanted to mention, but this is definitely a concern. And the other one is interpretability of models, where we want to know what are the top driver features of the model, because if we understand the model, it will increase our human in the loop, their confidence in using it, or just consulting it, not necessarily making a decision. As of the use of the models to decide who is the target, I think this should be banned. 100%. This should never happen. A prediction model, just like whether it's a system or human, shouldn't be used to target civilians or target humans. So I think this has to be regulated and banned completely. This is my take.
Shall we take 3 questions?
Yeah, I have 2 here.
All right.
On this side, yeah.
Okay, we got 2 here and then 1 there. All right.
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation. I had a couple of questions. The first one was linked to the initial discussion on integrating AI on the battlefield. Thank you very much for explaining the different systems and ways in which it's integrated. And my question would be, how you describe that, Ulrike, as rather as an enabler right now, but how do you see this opening new vulnerabilities as well? By putting in the hands of AI very sovereign decisions like looking after stocks or different fields that you looked at, doesn't that also open somehow surfaces of attack when the AI might fall into the wrong hands or depending on the evolution of the AI? My second question was more for you, Julie, on information integrity. You brushed upon the way in which AI could be used to monitor information integrity and getting rid of these difficult jobs and PTSDs. Is there also maybe a further step in which AI can help detect both AI-generated content online and AI-generated processes of dispatching content because maybe AI is also good as recognizing itself on the web, and maybe we can find a solution as well to the expansion of fake news through this use of AI. Thank you.
Hi, this is Eduardo Rojas. I'm from the Mission of Peru. My question, maybe it's complementary, and I was very interested when we mentioned about accountability and AI decision making. So I would be very curious to know if in current developments and research there are models where for specific decisions, some decisions are delegated to AI, but the accountability of the results are still like on the person that decided to delegate those actions, and it's going to be held accountable of the result of that. Thank you.
We'll take 1 more from this table. 2 more.
I have 2 quick questions. First, something more general. I'm sorry. Hi, Diane from the Philippine Mission. I have 2 questions, one more generic and one specific to conflict. Ansaf, you mentioned that AI can free us from mental drudgery. Is there a future where we don't have to work 8 hours a day to meet productivity? And my second question is that traditionally conflict prevention is cheaper than peacekeeping or peace building. And if you look at the list of root causes of conflict, there's possibility that is there a possibility that there are more not possibility. Currently, are there a lot more AI applications being developed to address root causes of conflict, such as poverty, hunger, economic stagnation, environmental degradation, or is AI currently more appealing to military applications? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you for the panel for the very informative discussion. I actually had a very similar question to what my colleague here had mentioned. Is there any the discussion around AI has been more or less mainly focused on the military side of use of AI, but is there any context where it has been applied in conflict resolution and mediation efforts somewhere around that scope? I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself. I'm Mohammed Halima from the Embassy of Egypt in Moscow.
Right, these are great questions. Maybe I'll start with your question about the mental drudgery. I do think that AI can help reduce the task, the burden of doing things, for instance, but it will always be to humans to do their jobs, right? So I mentioned the doctors, but you could also think about many other applications. Just to give you an example, sorry. If you think, for example, about the Sudoku game, right? AI can solve the hardest Sudoku in the world. My students do it in a fraction of a second, right? The algorithm. It can take a human several hours to solve it. So what I mean by that is it's not because AI is smarter, it's because AI has the computational capability to search into a large space of possibilities and come up with a solution. And that can be beneficial to a human who doesn't have that capability, but to a human who can reason and think about, how to solve the problem, but can use AI as an assistant. So ultimately, it can reduce the mental drudgery of going through tons of medical records, going through a lot of, maybe documentations and publications. That's where AI can help, but we never, I think, eliminate the beautiful human mind in this loop. Yeah, so that's for the. I'll take left, maybe others.
Okay, I do want to say AI is really good at games because it's good at constrained environments where the rules are known. And so it's good at chess, it's good at Sudoku. Conflict is not really an unconstrained environment with rules everyone agrees on. So I'm not, I think that you just have to think about that when you think about use of AI in that space. The question on AI and deepfakes. So I wish that AI was good at detecting deepfakes, but it is not. As of right now, the literature is pretty definitive that it's extremely difficult to detect deepfakes, AI-generated text, AI-generated images, AI-generated voice. All of the systems that have been designed to detect them have failed. The only thing that really works is once humans using normal techniques like, looking at the shadows or the way, something detect an AI-generated image, then they can enter it into a database of known AI-generated images, and that can be used to check. But that's for existing known images. Detecting new AI-generated images is unfortunately, I hope it eventually happens, but currently it hasn't been. So that is disappointing. I wanted to talk about the question of accountability. Somebody raised the question of AI accountability. Maybe the person using the AI should be accountable for those decisions. And that is certainly the case right now. So people who drive autonomous vehicles but use it on self-driving mode have been prosecuted for crashes that happen. There's a couple of cases like that. Certainly, I did a big investigation in 2016 about the use of, it wasn't actually AI, but machine learning that judges across the US are using in criminal risk scores. So when somebody's arrested, they ask them a bunch of questions in a questionnaire and then predict whether they will go on to commit a future crime. And then the judges use that prediction in their decision on whether to release this defendant on bail. And I did a big statistical analysis of this that showed that Black defendants were twice as likely to be misclassified as high risk when they were not, and that white defendants were twice as likely to be misclassified as low risk when they were not. And so there was a huge bias by race. And when I talked to the judges, because they were essentially the human in the loop working alongside these assessments, the thing that's unfortunate is that they really believed they were making the decision themselves. They said, that doesn't affect me. I saw that this guy was listed as a 10 and high risk, but I knew he was kind of an 8. And so, I made that decision. And what they weren't accounting for was that their own mental model had shifted, right? The heuristic had anchored. This is the thing about anchoring on the menu, right? They would put one $75 item on the menu so that you think it's fine to order the 35. This is exactly what's happening with that kind of AI model. So when you work alongside an AI model, what you can think that you have agency, but in reality, you're being anchored by that model. And so I think the liability should be on the makers of those models because they're the one actually doing that decision is sort of being made and adjusted by them.
Ulrike, can I invite you to also address the issue about prevention?
Definitely. Okay, so many thoughts, but I'll keep them short. First of all, what was just being said about being anchored by AI, I think this is really important because, so I don't know what context this was but I just wrote down, kind of, if you don't want AI to recommend decisions, then you can't really use it, I want to say almost at all, because you don't need an AI system that tells you exactly, okay, you need to do this. So let's say you need to target that building. It's already recommending a decision if it is telling you, well, I have calculated there is an 85% likelihood that this is a militant building. And then it doesn't say, you should be targeting it, but of course that's kind of implied. And if you don't want that, then that is what AI in data analysis kind of does. So just keep this in mind. On AI in kind of conflict for other things than military, I mean, so first of all, just so that's clear, the military applications of AI are definitely not the kind of main driver for AI development in general, right? The civilian realm is way ahead. So of course, the military cares and arms manufacturer cares, and they try to use all of this, but this isn't the technological development that's coming out of that's kind of being driven by the military realm. But in the conflict setting, I guess it's true that a lot of effort is put into, weapons and military and all of that. However, artificial intelligence is also used, for example, to try and predict conflicts. Of course, with an eye on, then preventing it. But I know of several projects that kind of go through, for example, social media and kind of freely available information and try to predict, to see, where could be conflicts brewing that we can't quite see yet, and where can we then help for these conflicts not to break out and become an actual military conflict. So that does happen. That does exist, and there's research on that. There was a question on vulnerabilities and whether AI doesn't actually create vulnerabilities. I mean, it definitely does. The biggest one I'm worried about is around the area of sabotage, because we all know that AI systems are what we call black boxes, right? It's very difficult, sometimes just impractical, sometimes so impractical to become impossible to understand how AI comes up with its result, right? Why does it tell you to target that building, or why does it tell you 85% likelihood that this building is of military use? And so this is a challenge in and of itself, because you kind of wonder how much you can trust AI, and it can make mistakes. But the problem is that given that it's a black box, detecting sabotage becomes incredibly difficult, because how would you know whether an AI system is recommending you or is identifying something as a target because it knows more than you, because it is wrong, or because it has been sabotaged somehow. So the data that has been fed has been had been tampered with, or the algorithm, or whatever. So finding sabotage is incredibly important. And given that all military conflicts are conflicts, and that your enemy is always trying to sabotage you, that is a vulnerability I see that I find quite scary. But of course, there's also vulnerabilities in the sense of, I mean, especially in the US, but in the Western world in general, we are used to being the militarily dominant power. Now, we have learned that doesn't necessarily mean that you win all wars, but it still gives you a certain security, and there are certain things that are unlikely to happen to you because you are the military, the dominant power. Now, the big question that people are asking is whether AI may be this equalizer on the military scale, right? Where all of a sudden new actors can come about, and you may have all this, very expensive, very large equipment, hardware, and someone comes up and basically, with much less effort and much less capabilities to speak of, is able to fight you and to attack you. This is something I do worry about. I would not, if I had to predict, I would not predict that this would kind of change the balance of power in the long term, because in the end, it's always better to be bigger and have more money and more mass and all of this. So this still matters. But for individual kind of attacks, for a temporary advantage, this could definitely happen. And this is something that countries do worry about quite a bit. And then final kind of vulnerability or equalizer. There is a big worry and discussion in the military realm currently about how AI-enabled capabilities might affect or undermine nuclear capabilities, and specifically the nuclear balance of power. right? So we are more or less, I guess, aware of the fact that our current system of international security is very much based on a balance of power in the nuclear realm. You may not like it, you may feel that nuclear weapons are terrible, but still the kind of mutually assured destruction, the deterrence that we have built is something that has allowed a certain stability. Now, the fear is that AI-enabled capabilities may become, may help for other states, non-nuclear states possibly, or kind of enemy states, to turn the oceans transparent and therefore undermine any kind of sea-based second strike capability. What this means in practice is that countries like France or the UK that very much rely on their second strike capability being on sea and therefore unfindable, and therefore being able to say, if you strike me, you may destroy me, but you will strike first, but you'll be second that second. So I will strike back. If AI allows an enemy to turn the oceans transparent and to find your nuclear submarines, that second strike capabilities goes out of the window, and that means nuclear deterrence. Your nuclear deterrence goes out of the window. And if that happens, we're in completely uncharted water from an international stability point of view. And again, this is not an argument for nuclear weapons. I'm just saying that international stability as we know it today very much is based on this. And so this is one area where I do really feel that this could change, this could mix the cards anew and really change the kind of balance of power and military balance of power, geopolitically speaking.
Thank you, Ulrike. We're going to have to end on that cliffhanger. I believe we're at time. So thank you very much. This is our panel.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.